how is Mao seen in modern day China? What has Xi Jinping said about Mao?
So before Xi Jinping, there was this kind of assessment of Mao as having been early in the early 80s of being 70% right, 30% wrong.
I guess Mao's own analysis of Stalin was that Stalin was 70% right and 30% wrong. And so they apply the same kind of
Logic there.
mathematical analysis to Mao.
Yeah. But Xi Jinping has had a different way of talking about this. And he's talked about the first 30 years of the People's Republic of China and the second 30 years, and says that we should not use the successes of one to criticize the other, that we need to see where we are today as benefiting from both those first 30 years and those second 30 years, which implicitly, or he sometimes talks about a new era, it suggests that in many ways he sees China as now in a post-reform era. We can think about a third stage, and there are people who write about it in that way. And so he clearly, there's always been a way of trying to separate out a kind of Mao of the periods when things were not going horribly. And I think Xi Jinping would think that Mao, having managed to fight the Korean War to a standstill, which is how things are how the history of that period is described in the PRC, said, look, you had so many different forces of the more developed world fighting on one side, and that war did not end in a defeat for North Korea and for the Chinese side. So yeah, Xi Jinping, I think, wants to be seen as an inheritor of Mao, a continuer of one side of the Mao legacy, but clearly circling back to where we began, not the Mao who liked to stir things up, not the Mao who believed in mobilizing youth on the streets, not the Mao who let things get out of control, but the Mao who was responsible for strengthening the nation.